Now, climate change is quite literally one of the hot issues of the moment, as we're all urged to recycle more and lead greener lifestyles.
Well, today, Friends of the Earth is launching a new campaign to persuade the government to bring in a law to help reduce greenhouse gases. Well, helping raise awareness is the singer Thom Yorke from the rock band Radiohead. He's here along with the charity's director, Tony Juniper. Good morning. Welcome to both of you. Thanks very much for coming in. A bit of a change for you, Tom, from Radiohead to Friends of the Earth, saving the world.
Saving the world? Yeah. Well, we've got a day, haven't we? That's right. Yeah. We're finished about 6 o'clock this evening.
What made you decide to get involved?
This is an issue that's becoming basically more and more urgent. The science is less and less disputed. Well, there basically is no doubt now. Yeah. Basically, it's too terrifying. I find it too terrifying not to get involved. This is a way, personally, for me to direct my fear.
And get people to do something positive.
Yes, basically. I think Friends of the Earth have basically come up with the 3% reduction of carbon emissions year on year is basically the only sane solution to what is a problem that's too difficult to even comprehend.
I mean, Tony Juniper, I wanted to ask you about this because you want it compulsory, you want this in law, because the government, of course, has targets, has existing targets for carbon dioxide emission reduction. Why do you want to see a legal basis to it?
Well, as Tom says, the science has moved on now to the point where there's no doubt that climate change is real, it's caused by people, and it's a major problem, and the science tells us that if we want to avoid the worst effects of this, we have to take action now, and it's very good that the government has set targets into the future, some of them quite close into the future, but the reality is that the targets are not being met, and as the time goes by, the carbon emissions in the country are going up again. We've got huge emissions expected in the future to rise as aviation takes off, as traffic continues to grow, as we continue to burn coal. But fortunately, there are some very positive solutions out there which can lead to these year-on-year targets being met. 3% reductions every year being met through changing the way we generate power, the way we use it, changing the way in which we use transport. All of these things can be very good for the economy, can help save the environment and generate jobs too. So there's a lot of wins there to be found, and by setting a framework that is compulsory rather than leaving it to some voluntary action at some point in the future, which may or may not happen, but making it a law that all governments have to follow, then something will happen, and that's why we're asking the public to join in, and people can go to thebigask.com where they can get more information about the campaign.
This is the name of the campaign.
The campaign's called The Big Ask. Ask. The Big Ask.
I mean, the K very clearly enunciated.
Yes, the K.
Tom, I mean, you know, we talk about it very often on breakfast, actually, all these problems and government initiatives and all the rest of it. The problem is, it's actually the infrastructure doesn't really exist in this country, does it, to help people recycle? I mean, that is part of the problem. It's too much of a difficult
No, but what you have to remember about the actual proportions of emissions and so on is that basically a law needs to be put in place first that makes carbon emission an issue, and the personal things that you and I try to do to make a difference are important, but are not as important as, for example, decommissioning all the old coal-fired power stations that should have been decommissioned 10 years ago. Basically, there's a series of very, very large villains that the government knows about that need to be dealt with, and basically a personal witch hunt against people saying you aren't doing enough, you aren't doing enough. If there's not a legal framework, a legal structure so everybody knows where they stand, this is an issue, and if that's put in place, the sort of hysteria and panic will go away, and the sense of powerlessness will go away. I mean, this is, another reason I got involved was that sort of sheer, like, there's nothing you can do about it.
It's interesting, that sense of powerlessness, because a lot of people say, well, look, I recycle in the limited way that my local council allows me to. You know, I don't drive a car very often. I use public transport. But there's not much else that I'm allowed to.
Well, what we find in our campaigns is that people are willing to join in. If only it's made easy, they can see that everybody's got an opportunity to make a difference, and it's fair. And, you know, if somebody's taking a real sacrifice themselves but sees everybody else continuing to drive their 4x4s and waste energy, they feel a bit powerless. So if you get the government to start setting the framework so these things can be taken forward as a whole society, because climate change will affect the whole of society, and not just now, but into the future, and if we don't do something now, then the effects on our children and our grandchildren could quite simply be catastrophic. The stakes are far too high for us to be leaving this to voluntary action and leaving it down to individuals. And so if people go to thebigask.com, you can get really active, and as well as doing your recycling and saving a bit of energy, sign onto the website, get the newsmail updates by email, and lobby your MP.
Hassle your MPs, yeah.
And we can get there. We can make this happen. And setting the framework, it's really positive. This is not a campaign about sacrifice. It's a campaign about changing things in a way that everybody will benefit.
3% a year is not a major deal. Basically, if we don't do the 3% a year, you'll leave it till it's too late.
Okay. Points powerfully made. Thank you very much indeed for coming in and talking to us
Pleasure.
about that.
Thank you so much.
As you pointed out, your website we'll put on our website.
Thank you very much.
And people can get involved that way.
Lovely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Great.